famous story about, or statement, that Kodesh Baruch Hu went around to all the other nations to ask them if they wanted to accept the Torah or not. And we went through it, and we ended up with a very substantial question. Right? Right? It's your question, right? Okay, so the question was, Kodesh Baruch Hu went over to the nations, and he said to them, okay, you want to accept the Torah? So he goes to Bnei Yosef and said, you want to accept the Torah? And he says, yeah. Okay, what's in it? Well, we'll check it out. What's in it? He says, it says, Lo Tirtzach. What the Bnei Yosef? They said, Lo Tirtzach. Lo Tirtzach. We're murderers. That's our whole being, is being a murderer. Forget it. We're not interested. Went to the Bnei Ammon, and what does Kodesh Baruch Hu say? He says, well, he asked the same thing. What's in it, Kodesh Baruch Hu? He says, Lo Sinaf. Right? Basically, don't commit adultery. Don't incest, the Arias. He says, what are you talking about? These guys, this is who we are. Right? We're, Lot, Ammon are descended from Lot and his daughter. They're products of incest. That's who we are. So then he went to the Bnei Shmuel. He goes to Bnei Shmuel and says, okay, Bnei Shmuel, want the Torah? And they say, okay, what's in it? Lo signov. Don't steal. Don't steal? That's who we are. Right? Our essential nature is to be thieves. Right? Para Adam. The wild we take from, that's who we are. So no thank you. So the question that was asked last week, right, we concluded was? Right, they're all part of Shem Mrs. Bnei Noach. So effectively, these three mitzvot, they were already commanded in. So like, what's going on here? It's going to them and say, what's in it? Don't do something you're already not going to do. No, we don't want it. Too bad, you already have it. You're already mechuyev in the Sheva mitzvahs. So what exactly is going on over here? And why is it that Kodesh Baruch Hu specifically brings these examples when he knows that these nations will respond specifically, to these commands? What's in it? Give them something that they enjoy. Okay, we'll take two. You know what I mean? But no, they had to give them something that specifically would challenge their very being. So, what this seems to imply is there may be a difference between the Shem Mrs. Bnei Noach and Torah. So the question is, what's that difference? What exactly is going on in this Sifri? In this Mimer from Sifri? Any ideas?
You're saying that having to do with the reason behind it? Or that, like with Torah, the reason we do it is different than the reason why they do the Shem Mrs. Bnei Noach?
There could be an argument of why do it. When we come around and we say Na'aseh v'nishma, which is the way that it concludes, and say we'll take it without even asking what it's about. The question is not just why we do it. There's an aspect that the Jewish nation responded, Bnei Yisrael responded differently than the Ummah Olam, and that really indicates why they really have Torah. But what really comes out of it also is the fact that there is an inherent difference in the relationship as defined by the Shem Mrs. Bnei Noach. In other words, God's relationship with man is defined by the Shem Mrs. Bnei Noach, and the relationship is defined by Torah. And that's the question. Right? Any ideas?
Shem Mrs. Bnei Noach out of authority?
Yeah.
Call Yisrael is more out of, what's the word? Contract.
Okay, it's true. What's the essence of contract?
Understanding.
Understanding. So if it's understanding, so what's essentially going on over here? They're onto something. If it's understanding, what's then necessary? Agreement. And therefore, what's necessary in this?
To be in agreement and not have the mouth and held above their head.
And what else? If it's a contract, one of the aspects of contract is the ability to analyze and recognize what you're getting into. If I want to make a contract with you and you want to sign over this contract, this idea, I want to know what I'm getting for the contract. That's inherent in the battle of the contract. If a guy comes up to you and says, I want to sell you something, I'm not going to tell you what, I want to sell you something. Do we have a deal? It's not a deal. A deal is, something in it. Well, what's in it? Well, if I'm going to say it's a mystery, but it's good for you. Okay, let me hear how this works out. Okay? The fact is, if it's a contract, what you're saying is the Umas HaOlam would have been absolutely correct in what they did. They would have said, listen, what's in it? If you're asking me to do a contract, then makes sense that they asked. Right? Okay, so why is there a problem with the Umas HaOlam did, and how is it B'naseh B'nishma becomes an answer? Okay, if a Kodesh Baruch Hu wants a contract, he wants people to analyze things. If I want someone to be a bar chachi, to be someone who can enter into contractual relations with me, I want to give them the ability to be a contract. My father tells a story when he came over here from Europe after the war. He was a tailor. He started working in a tailor shop, Jewish owner or whatever, and he said, so they were working, so he was a good tailor, he was working and so forth and so forth. He actually hated tailoring. Eventually he left the business as soon as he could. He hated being a tailor, but the fact is he was good, so he did it really good. So the owner of the tailor shop came over to him and said, Eshel, you're a really good tailor. I'll tell you what, this guy was a master. He says, something, it's so good, I'm gonna make you a suit. I'll make you a suit and give you a gift of a suit, right from the master sailor. So my father looked at him and said, something that's very nice of you, but if you really appreciate my work, then why don't you just increase my salary? The boss got very, very upset with him for saying that. My father told me, he says, but you don't understand something. If he just would have given me a gift, that would have always been in a matter of beholding to the gift. Thank you for the gift, and so forth and so forth. But if he would have rewarded me for my work and said, listen, we have a contractual relationship, then there's an equality there. I do work, you pay. Right? It's not a gift. And that's a very fundamental aspect in Torah. We speak about this in terms of the contractual relationship, that the reason we say that, let's say, a Russia has to get some schar for the good things he does in this world is because if you do something good, the contract with the Kodesh Baruch Hu is that you are going to get some positive thing for it. So it's a contract. It's not God being nice. It's God maintaining his obligation. And the whole thing that Kodesh Baruch Hu gave us is the fact that working in this world and being able to develop our own Olam Haba and become our own Olam Haba is the fact that it becomes something that I am deserving. It's not just simply out of the grace of God, it's because of the fact that God is obligated to give me for the good. That's a question of din. That's really the idea of din. And sometimes it's a very difficult concept. I mean, lahavdil from Christianity, they're talking about grace all the time. The whole thing is, man, you can't deserve anything. It's because of Jesus' grace that you live, because you're totally worthless, and you it's totally out of grace. It's God's goodness that He gives you the future world or whatever. But exactly the point of Yiddishkeit and the Torah concept is the reason we work to earn Olam Haba is because the fact is the greatest gift that Kodesh Baruch Hu can give us is that we have earned it and it becomes ours. And it becomes something that Kodesh Baruch Hu has given us the ability to earn it, becomes ours, and obligate Him in giving to us. Right? So it's a very different thing. Of course you say thank you. Of course Kodesh Baruch Hu is still a Baal Rachamim and gives you much more than you deserve and stuff like that. All those things are true, right? There's a whole side of Rachamim involved also, but the essence of the din aspect is the fact that you become someone who becomes deserving of it, which means you become an entity. It's not just that God is just giving it to you, you've actually earned it, therefore it's yours. You're actually Kona Olam Haba, it's yours. So in that concept, there's a very strong idea of contractual. In a contractual perception, it starts off with a recognition of a relationship and the formation of a relationship. So a person saying, hey, what's in the contract, that makes sense in terms of a true, honest contract. Right? So the Umos HaOlam, if it was authority, they say, listen, you're telling us not to murder. Okay. I don't like it, but, you got a big stick. I'm gonna listen to you. You got the authority, you got the power to support your authority. I'm not gonna murder because, even though I really like murdering, I'm not gonna do it because you have the authority. So the Seven Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, according to what you're saying, okay, that works. However, they're coming up saying, but we understand you're not offering something under the Seven Mitzvahs Bnei Noach. You're offering something that's contractual, a whole new madrega. Well, that involves our involvement. That involves we have to be there. So what's in it? Why should we accept it? Right? Makes sense. That's their argument. Okay? So now the Yumas Olam makes sense. So the problem is, how does Klal Yisrael go away with just saying Nasiv and Ishma?
They had Yitzias Mitzrayim and they had a history?
Possibility. So therefore that's very simple. What you want is what we want to do anyways. So I heard one Rosh Yeshiva try to answer it that way. Okay? He tried to answer it that something like this is because Klal Yisrael they just wanted to be close to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. So if they just wanted to be close to a Kodesh Baruch Hu, right? Whatever Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted, we knew that would bring closeness of Kodesh Baruch Hu. It's like saying, yeah, but the problem with that is let me say, listen, I got ice cream to sell. Okay, I go around to you and I say, and I'm I got the ice cream truck and the bells are ringing, everyone knows I'm an ice cream guy. Okay, some guy comes by, I'm clear up selling ice cream, some guy comes by and says, what are you selling? Ice cream. I'm lactose intolerant, it's not for me. Okay, another guy comes by, what are you selling? Ice cream. Ice cream, that's too much sugar, it's not for me, I can't have sugar, right? Whatever, right? Fourth guy comes up and says, I want 2 scoops. Because I already know you're an ice cream salesman. And I love ice cream. So is that the position of Klal Yisrael? Is that their position? In other words, of course they're going to accept it because they've already they're already seen benefit. The other people it's not beneficial, but the Jews it was beneficial to. Is that it? It just shows that hey, it was tailor-made for us. Is that the answer? That's why they said Nasiv and Ishma, because we can have ice cream. We like ice cream. We can have ice cream. Is that it?
Why not?
Okay, so it's basically saying that all we're saying here is we're different than non-Jews. All this measure is saying is that really what Torah offers, it's really not good for the non-Jews, but it's good for the Jews. And the Jews didn't have to ask any questions because they already knew that.
Why is that something wrong to believe? Because that's what we believe. We don't believe that the non-Jews should keep the Torah.
No, the fact is that that's not so simple, by the way. We know they can't. There's 2 mitzvahs specifically that there's a problem with them doing. One is Shmir Shabbos, and one is learning Torah, and both of them are much more complicated. Especially learning Torah is much more complicated. If you look at the Rambam seems to say that any non-Jew who does a mitzvah gets schar as an Eina Mitzvah Osa. That seems to be Pashut Pshat in the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim, which is the way I always understood it. The Rambam specifically says they can't do Shabbos, they can't do and learn Torah, but everything else they get schar as an Eina Mitzvah Osa. Okay. The fact is there's Moshe Feinstein in Igros Moshe. I just saw it over the weekend. My Rabbi actually mentioned to me a while ago, but I actually only just saw it over the weekend. Sort of found the place and started looking at it, but I have to go further into it, where he says it's obvious that non-Jews do not get any schar for doing certain mitzvahs. Like the non-Jew puts on tefillin, they don't get schar. Non-Jew takes Lev, they don't get schar. He says there's certain things they do get schar for. Keep it abayim, they do get schar for, and so forth and so forth. As an Eina Mitzvah Osa, and there's no problem, and they have no problem of adding on mitzvahs, so they don't have any problem of what's it called, of the issue of adding on mitzvahs, so they can add on mitzvahs, but they can't do so. The other mitzvahs are irrelevant to them. That's the way Ramosha, and he just starts explaining how he's learning the Rambam. But if you read the Rambam aside, it doesn't see what the Rambam is saying. But the fact is so they can't get scarred. But the truth is that it's so, okay, you want to say it's not for them or whatever, that's a possibility. But the fact is that Nasav, it takes away a certain luster of Nasav and Ishmael. It's like saying, hey, this is what we want. Of course we're going to take two. So,
it's like, it could be something like somebody who really loves sports. And they watch their favorite sport player every day after school. They come home and they watch and they watch and they watch. And they love their favorite sports player. And if they see it, the guy will toss them a ball. And they want the ball. And anything that sports player does, they're going to do. But it doesn't mean that it's any less important. Even
but but at this point in time, we think in terms of Nasav and Ishma, this remarkable statement that first of all, we already read was something that was, the secret of Mlachei Asharet. But more significantly, over here, when they come to them, the whole thing of do you want to get the Torah? And they don't even ask questions. Says we're going to do it. Yeah, all you're saying is that they already knew it was for them. It doesn't mean that it's like saying, hey, yeah, of course we know you're the ice cream salesman. We want ice cream. That doesn't mean this big. It tells you, okay, they're not lactose intolerant. They like ice cream. But it doesn't say. It may say something. In fact, it shows their essence that they're a little bit like this. But there's no real mesirus nefesh from this. It would seem. It's no.
It comes from somewhere. It's not just something that came from nothing.
Okay, but obviously they're going to do it. It's like you give someone something to do, and you say it's like. It was a joke when I was in Yeshiva. The guy said, you know what Olam Haba is? So Olam Haba is walking into the base medrash, and Moshe Rabbeinu is giving shir. Eternal shir for Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? If you're a guy who really learned and liked learning, what could be a more bigger mechaya than hearing shir for Moshe Rabbeinu? If you're a guy who never liked being in the base medrash, what could be the biggest gehenim than having an eternal shir from someone? So it's a matter of what you like. So you're right. So what you're saying is you want to say it shows what kind of person they were. That it shows that their essence was to be people who wanted to get close to God or whatever. It's a possibility, but in a certain way, Nasav and Nishma no longer becomes this mesirus nefesh statement. Nasav and Nishma basically says, and we liked it so much, and we already knew what was in it. We knew what was ever in it was going to give us this result, and of course they took it. They didn't have to ask it because they already knew that.
Or it's like the ice cream man and comes with like 2 scoops chocolate vanilla, and the guy says, well, I have these new flavors. No one's ever tried them before. They're new.
Fine, great. You're the ice cream man. You're the ice cream man, right? What do the ice cream man says these are great flavors. Great. Oh, you're the ice cream. You're the ice cream. I mean, sure, I'm going to try them. It's not such a big deal. What? I don't think it's.
You can still go for chocolate and vanilla.
Yeah, you can, but basically, the fact is that I'm just trying to say there's an idea of what you're saying. It shows what Klal Yisrael was like. It shows that if they perceived Torah as offering this, then they would for sure want it, right? If you say their essence is to try and get close to God, they for sure would want it. Okay, fine. So you go up to the B'nai Yosef, we're not really interested in this religion stuff. So they're not interested. You go up to some guys who are really into religion stuff, and yeah, sure we want it. We want this. But it shows that you're the kind of person who likes this. But the Nasav and Nishma concept, which has this idea that it's a remarkable. I don't like the word. I don't want just the word mesirus nefesh. It's a remarkable jump of faith. It's a remarkable acceptance of an onus it's something that really shows that they were willing to do this regardless of the consequence, regardless of the question. In other words, what the Ummah Olam did is question. What you're basically saying is that they didn't have to question. Okay, so it shows what kind of people are, because they didn't have to question, because they already recognize what's going to be offered to them. But the whole point of Nasiv and Nishma has an aspect to it that even without questioning, even if just sort of saying we don't know what's going to be, we're still going to do it. That's something that's something in addition to it. You understand? There's something about Nasiv and Nishma that implies that there's certain aspect we're not sure what we're getting into, but we're going to do it. What you're saying is they already knew what they were going to get into, but they already had an idea of what they were going to get into, and they liked what they were getting into. Bnei Yosef didn't like what they were going to get into. Bnei Ammon, the Bnei Ishmael, comes out, they would not like what they were getting into. But Bnei Israel didn't have to ask any questions, because they would like what they would get into. They knew they were going to like what they were going to get into.
Not that they would like it, but that it would be good for them.
It would not contradict their beings. It would be something that would go with who they were. Right?
Well, they saw this coming, but they did see
yes,
this coming.
Yeah. They saw this coming, and what you're saying, this just tells you who they are. What you're saying is that, like what I tried to tell from that story, is if a guy says, I really like going to shiurim, then the person is you're telling me what you like. In other words, there's a certain level where my Rabbi once said, it's really bad. It's really from the Gra, it seems. A person's going to be a Talmud Chacham, he has to really enjoy learning. He has to really enjoy learning. Okay, so you have to have a real taiva for it, a real interest in it, and so forth and so forth. So obviously, if you say I'm going to a shiur, you're saying something about yourself that's, from our perspective, a good thing. So the fact that Bnei Israel wants to do what God tells them to do is a good thing. But what you're doing is you're saying, listen, all you're doing is telling me something about this nation, that they want to do this kind of thing, which is good. And I have no problems with that. I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that there's an aspect of Nasiv and Nishma that seems to imply that there was some value in them not knowing what they were getting into, but still trusting God. What you're just saying is what you're saying is not negative, but the fact is,
number one negate number two.
Okay, so try and put it in terms of contractual terms. You see, I get into a contract, okay, and I'm selling something as a contract. Person asks what you're selling. I'm selling this. That's not for me. I'm selling that. Not for me. Go to another person, doesn't even ask, and says, yes, I'll sign a contract right now without asking questions. Why does he do it? Because he already knows what you're selling, and he likes what you're selling. Right? That seems to be what you're saying over here. They already know what Kodesh Baruch Hu is about. They already have a relationship with Kodesh Baruch Hu. They sort of know what the idea of connecting to God is about. And they liked it. So the fact is why they signed the contract is because they just read between the lines and figured out that, hey, this is what the contract's about. I don't have to read the fine print. I sort of know what the contract's about anyways. So that's what you, in other words, the other people, they had to check out what's in the contract because they didn't know the contract, and they weren't so careful about it. But what you're saying is the Jews didn't ask any questions because they already sort of knew what the contract was about, and they liked the contract. They wanted that return.
Or it's like you're signing a contract that you know you're going to get paid, say, $3 million for signing the contract, but you don't know what the contract entails. You want the $3 million, so I'm going to sign it. But Nasa the Nishna, I'm gonna sign it, and then I'm gonna find out what I have to do to get it.
And Bnei Yosef didn't want the $3 million.
They didn't want it enough. They were already rich.
So the Jews weren't rich. For them, hey, it still made a lot of sense to sign the contract. They knew something about the contract. They're going to get $3 million from it. They knew they were going to get close to Kodesh Baruch Hu through this contract. So obviously they wanted the contract.
But that doesn't mean that they still have to work for it.
Fine. Okay. There is something to what you're saying that may fit in here, in the sense that what you're still trying to say is there had to be something they didn't know. there had to be, but there had to be some issue in them not knowing and what the gamble that they were taking and not knowing. Right. Okay. So that's really of the essence of what's really going on here. Okay. So I'm not denying Bnei Yisrael obviously had a relationship with the Kosh Baruch Hu and things like that. But what I'm trying to say is in Nasiv and Ishma there had to be some aspect of a gamble that they trusted God to solve the gamble. It was God wasn't going to ask them to do something for $3 million that would be bad for you, right? He wasn't going to ask anything that he knew. They trusted God was not going to ask them for anything that would really be against what their being is about, right? Because we're not going to ask you to do something wrong for the $3 million. We're not going to ask you to do something that we know you're going to hate about for the $3 million. For sure, He's not going to ask you to do something for the $3 million that when you find out what He's going to ask you, you're going to turn around and say, I wish I never agreed to this.
Or He might, and that might be the hard part of getting the $3 million.
Might be.
Like just because Klal Yisrael said yes and we're going to do it, and we'll try to understand, doesn't mean that they're going to. They should, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to enjoy every mitzvah. Okay,
at some point in time, as a contract, if they would have said, something, if we would have known that what this is about, we never would agree to this contract, right? What would have happened? You would have not had a real contractual relationship. We relied upon you because you're God, and now we're finding out that we relied upon something, and it's really not true because we never would have agreed to this contract if we would have known what you were going to do. That's what you're saying. In other words, somehow.
Just because something's hard for you and it's against your nature.
But if it's contractual, which we were trying to say at the beginning, that it's important for Klal Yisrael to sort of know what they were doing, right? Then, if they would have said, listen, if we really would know what we were going to do and we never would have agreed, then it's no longer contractual. If we said that, listen, if I'm relying upon you as an authority, fine. If I rely upon you because I trust you, fine. But the fact is, if it's contractual, then it has to be that I made a decision that was a correct decision. Now what you're saying is that if it would have turned out that if I would have known, it would have been ridiculous for me to have agreed to this, I never would have agreed to it, then what's happening is I'm no longer in a correct contractual relationship. It didn't come out of my full das. It didn't come out of my full perception.
Well, it depends when we're looking at the contract, in 120 years or now.
Whatever. The fact is that you're saying when you get paid, you found out, hey, I see what I got paid over here, I'm saying what you're asking me to do for the payment. If I would have known, I never would have signed that contract. If that's true, then it takes away the whole need that God had for a contractual relationship. So why bother with a contractual relationship? Just order them to do it. Kosh Baruch Hu tell them, make them, just order them to do it. Under authority.
It's different because they wanted to do it.
They don't want to do it because they had a certain perception of what it was about. If they would not have wanted to do it, according to this scenario, if they would have really known what it's about, they never would have wanted to do it. You can't have that they wanted to do it, right? And then say if they wanted to do it, they have some idea that it's going to be beneficial. If they didn't want to do it, they have some idea that it's not going to be beneficial. I mean, the point is that evaluating that they're wanting to do it is an important factor to this. It has to be that their wanting to do it has to have some type of value. That if they didn't want to do it, it would have been a problem. That's what contracts are about. Right? The fact that your desire to do it is an important factor in this contract.
Right, so their desire to want to change themselves and go against their natural tendency.
Is that what they wanted to do?
Well, that's what we do as Jews. Versus the non-Jews.
Why do you want to go against your natural tendency?
Because...
What?
Well...
What?
To channel your natural tendency.
To channel it's not, that's different than going against it. It's channeling your natural tendencies, not going against them. Okay. It's clear what that's where the Gra understands it. Harach l'narpi v'darko. You see the Gra's statement on Mishlei and Harach l'narpi v'darko. He's clearly talking about channeling. You cannot go against your natural tendencies.
But channeling is a way of going against it.
Not according to the Gra. He's saying there's another way of doing it.
But aren't they essentially the same thing? If you're a very selfish person, then you do something to make yourself less humble. That's going against yourself.
That's improving your midas, and how you go about improving it. But the fact is that there has to be a something. You know, and Rosh Shiva who pointed this out to me. If you go up to someone who's really a balgaiva, you know, that's the kind of person he is, right? How do you get him to be an anaf? How do you get him to be humble? His whole being is ego. So how do you get him to be humble? So you go to and say, oh, you tell him Pirkei Avos that the person who runs after covered doesn't get covered. Oh, so you go to the egotistical person and say, listen, if you really want to get some honor, the thing to do is act as if you don't want honor. But really, what you want is honor. That's really who you are. An anaf is someone who is not interested in honor. But the fact is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to get him to act like an anaf by appealing to his drive for honor. You really want honor? Do this. It looks like you're against honor. But really, the reason you're doing it is because you're really motivated by honor. Right? So, the fact is that who you are, even if you say, I'm going against my natural tendency, why? There's got to be some reason, because there's some other natural tendency that's taking some control, that this is what I want. We can never escape our own desires, who we are as individuals. Right? We think, oh no, no. The truth is that why you're doing something always goes back to your original drives. So the thing is to channel them a certain way, but you're going to tell someone who's driven by something, he has to find something that he's driven by to be able to do something.
But that's really the definition of go against your natural tendency.
Well, I don't know, but I think you have to be careful what it means, because going against natural tendencies, in the end, you become someone who is a little bit more in line with natural tendencies. The truth is, it's an interesting perception between the Ramosh and the Chazon Ish, but a person who is going against the natural tendencies inherently will be miserable. Okay, so the fact is, Ramosh created the concept of Shver Zayin Yid. It's hard to be Jewish, because basically he felt that being a Torah Jew can give you a good life, a happy life. You can walk away saying, I had a great life. It was a very fulfilling, great life, just from a human perspective, because your natural human desires were satisfied, were met. I'm not saying all of them 100% of the time, but the fact is you walk away and say, listen, why? Because that's what life is about. I want to be happy. Happy means that my drives are being met. Right? Now the truth is that in a certain way you have certain religions that basically, you know, the whole idea is to be miserable, and really what they're working on is a belief that they'll get, you know, something, they'll get better in the next world. Like you take in terms of a lot of people, in terms of all the stories about suicide bombers, right? They're promised X amount of virgins in the next world because they're miserable down here. But if I do this act, which will be totally detrimental to me, I'll get what I really want in the next world and be happy. But my drive will be satisfied at some time, really, if I believe this, right? Because I'm miserable here anyways, right? But the point is that there has to be some concept of happiness. Now, there's certain ways you could say they believed in Olam Haba. That as miserable they'll be down here, they believed in Olam Haba. And B'nai Yosef didn't care about Olam Haba.
But I'm not saying miserable. I'm saying part of the joy of life is realizing that you triumphed over something. In order to triumph over something has to be hard.
Very good. If you have the drive of wanting to triumph over something. If you don't have that drive, you don't really care. Okay, so what I'm saying is, it's very true. What's happening is it gets back to the same thing. The Jews had the drive to accept Torah. In other words, back to the same scenario with the ice cream guy. I don't like ice cream. I don't like ice cream. I don't like ice cream. Okay, you ask these people, they like ice cream, so therefore what you're going to offer, they're going to for sure take. They don't even have to ask what it is, they already know it's ice cream.
But just because you have the job doesn't mean that you're going to take it without thinking.
But that's what they did here. They said not of an issue.
There's a reason why that was such an easy
right.
They did.
You're right. What you're saying is because they already did thought it was it was a slam dunk. Of course they're going to do it. It's what they want. I live for ice cream. The ice cream guy is coming with ice cream. I'm going to ask why?
Okay, so
please.
Why is it a problem?
What?
Why is it a problem?
Why is what a problem?
Nasa v'nishma. If it was what they want, why is Nasa v'nishma a problem?
It's not a problem. The question is, what's the big deal? Nasa v'nishma, they accepted before they even questioned what was in it.
Because they wanted it that much.
Because they knew what was in it.
But they didn't know what was in it.
But you just told me.
The concept.
They understood what the concept was. They didn't know exactly how you get there, but they understood. They didn't know the flavor of the ice cream that they would get, but they knew it was going to be ice cream. They knew they were going to get something that they would like. They didn't have to check out how they liked it. What?
They had very high suspicions that it would be something that they would like.
Okay. Let me. What you're saying is not totally off, but let me try and sort of put it all together. Okay? See, I'm going to throw out one thing that's going to explain my perspective here. God comes down and says, I got something I'd like you to do. Right? Okay? God says, I'd like you to have something to do. But I want you to agree to it. Let's understand this. Let's say God comes down to you guys and says, I got something I'd like you to do. And God says, I have something I'd like you to do. Okay? What are you guys going to do? What would you do? God says, hey, I got something I want you to do. What are you going to do? It's God. What are you going to do? You're going to sit there and say, gee, what's in it? Or you're going to sit there and say, it's God. Of course you'll do it. Right? What's the big deal? See, the fact is that God as an authority figure and as an all-knowing figure is part of the very essence of any relationship we have with God. If God says to us, I want you to do something, then for us to question whether we're going to do it or not challenges God's authority figure. Right? He's God. And also, if God says, I got something to do, and we know God is a Tov Meitiv, then what's the point of questioning it? Whatever you're going to tell me to do is going to be good for me. Right? So the fact is God comes and tells you something to do, the smartest thing to do is say, yes, I'll take two. Because A, you're God, so you have the authority to, and B, whatever you tell me to do is going to make sense to me because you are inherently also a Tov Meitiv, wants to do good for me, so obviously I'm going to take it. Right? Someone who knows you perfectly and knows exactly what's good for you says, okay, do this and you'll be happy. You're going to say, I don't understand how I'll be happy. But then again, you're all knowing, so I guess I'm going to do it. Right? Right?
Not necessarily.
No, why not?
It depends what they tell you to do. It depends. If God came over to me today and said, there's a baby on the floor, I want you to shoot it, I don't think I could, even if God commanded me to. And even though I know God is an all-knowing God and everything is going to be good and it's the right thing to do,
right.
I couldn't do it.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
So just because God commanded me to and I know He's all good, doesn't make any of the less chance.
That's why you're not Avram Avinu. What?
I don't understand because he knew that he shouldn't eat from the tree. But he knew what was.
Well, let me put it. Let's not deal with Adam and Chava. The word Hecht is not. The first time the word Hecht is mentioned in the Chumash. First time the word Hecht is mentioned in the Chumash. Any ideas? No. A little bit earlier than that. Word Hecht is not found at all in the story of Adam and Chava. The word Hecht is found for the first time in the story of Cain and Abel. The reason I find that interesting is because many years ago, Rabbi Mike Skobek, who's now with Jewish for Judaism, was the Hill director down at U of T. And I'm very close friends with Rabbi Skobach. And there was a theology, there's one of the divinity schools, U of T, wanted to have a program with Hillel, have a rabbi and one of their professors talk to some of the divinity students and so forth and so forth. So he asked me if I would do it. Because he was in a situation, he had to do it and so forth and so forth. They thought that he'd bring a few of the Hillel guys and the divinity students and so forth. But basically what it was is me and Rabbi Skobach and a professor from this divinity school and a bunch of these guys who were trying to be ministers. And we were going to talk about Adam and Eve. Fine. So I remember that while we're talking, and I said, you guys recognize the word sin is not found in the story whatsoever, right? Now, to Christianity, their whole faith is based upon original sin. So when I say that the word sin is not found in the story of Adam and Eve, it's a little bit of a shock. So what happened is that still the guy who actually organized the whole thing, he said, and the word sin is not found in the whole story. He's going, what? It's not found in the story? He looked at the professor, and the professor said, sir, is that true? And the professor responded by saying, yes, of course, it's a polished analysis of the story. It's a polished analysis of the story, blah, 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 blah. I'm telling you, you felt the guy just, what? And he's a divinity student, Okay, but the fact is, so I don't like, even though I refer to it as the Hecht, Adam and Chava, the fact is that if you look at the story, it's a little bit more complicated than that, than a Hecht. I have a whole article on it. It's a 3-part article. The 3rd part, which is really the punchline, is on the website. If you take a look at a website of the Tree of Knowledge, but I don't refer to it as a Hecht. I think it was a setup, and basically it was part of the 6th day of creation. It wasn't happened. It was part of the creation events that had to create what had to be created. But in my perception, Adam had a problem. The problem with Adam is that how is he going to become his own being? If basically what the Nachash said is V'yivrim v'hita kelokim. How is he going to have his own being if basically he trusted in God and everything he did because it was always right? It's very similar to a teenager. When a teenager has to rebel to establish his own presence, his own being. So if you're brought up by Rishayim, it's great to rebel. You become a tzaddik. So there was a Rav in Eretz Yisrael, Chaim Lifshitz, who was for a while the Meshkiach at Keren B'Yavne, and he went on to become he was a major psychologist. When I was in Eretz Yisrael 30 years ago, he was a major psychologist in Eretz Yisrael. The Datim, the Charedim, would always send anyone who needed psychology to Chaim Lifshitz, big Talmid Chacham, and he was also a Talmud of Piaget. Okay, studied 4 years by Piaget, philosophy, psychologist in Piaget. Yeah, he spent 4 years studying by Piaget. He was the Talmud of Piaget, so he was like a real psychological scholar. Anyway, so he said an interesting word. He said, why is it that the prayers of the Tzaddik ben Tzaddik are more acceptable than the prayers of the Tzaddik ben Rasha? By Yitzchak, his prayers were answered, Rivka's prayers weren't answered. Why? Because the prayers of the Tzaddik ben Tzaddik were, because the Tzaddik ben Tzaddik is a certain way. We all say Makam Shem Baal Tshuva Mohammed Ain't Sef Gamri Yakulama. He points out this is the opposite. So there's an argument to say it's like, why? Because it's one thing. You're born to a Russia. It's easy to establish your own identity, right? Avram Avinu established his own identity vis-a-vis Terach. But if you're Yitzchak, the son of Avram, how do you establish your own identity? Anything you do that's good, it's just what your father did. How do you establish your own identity? And that's why teenagers rebel in a certain way, because they have to establish their own identity. Okay, so how do you establish your own identity? So his whole argument is that was the great challenge to Yitzchak Avinu. That's why when he went back to build the Beros, when he went back to build the Beros in the exact same place that Avram built them, that was his great. he was able to go back and do the same thing as Avram did, but he still did it with the sign of with the stamp of Yitzchak. Okay, it's a tremendous challenge. So that really has a lot to do with, I think, Chadam and Chava's challenge of being of being able to establish their own being. Okay, and that's part of the issue over here. It's a very essential part of the issue over here. If you're a contract, you're basically saying, listen, I know what you're going to tell us to do is for my good. And I know you got authority to tell me what to do. But me understanding it establishes me as my own identity. Follow? So the question is if I rely upon you, if I sit there and say, hey, you're the authority, I got to listen to you. If I sit there and say, hey, you're God, you know everything. So, of course, I have to, of course I'm going to do it because it makes most sense to do it because it's good for me. But the fact is for me to be able to, but what's lost is my own identity. I haven't decided. I haven't been able to. How am I supposed to do it? And that's what comes out of contract. Bring out your own being. So the question is, Yuma Sa'olam basically said, hey, listen, at this point in time, we have to analyze it. So we can say, yes, I want to do it, so I become a bar hachi in this relationship. I have established my own identity. But there's a problem with it. The problem is that in establishing your own identity that way, you're being foolish. Because you're not recognizing the contractual relationship you're getting into. Because logically, not doing what God wants you to do is also stupid. In other words, you may not understand. A guy comes to you and says, this is good for you. You may not understand why it's good for you, but you recognize that if this person says it's good for you, it's going to be good for you. So that's a dilemma. The dilemma is, I don't understand why it's good for me. Okay? The Umas Olam didn't understand what's good for me. I'm supposed to make a decision that it's because of my own being and it's good for me, because I have to be in this as contractual and with an understanding. And at the same point in time, by definition, it's obviously going to be good for me, because whatever you tell me to do is going to be by definition what's right for me, even if I don't understand it. In addition to that, saying no to you, it challenges your authority, and I can't it's wrong to challenge the authority of God. So the Ummah Olam understood the problem. So they said, we're just going to ask the question. And once you got the answer, they said, well, we can't accept it because we just don't understand it. Yeah, you want to tell us to do it from your authority, God? Clearly, you can do that. You can tell us. If you want us to accept it because we totally trust you, because what we tell you to do is going to be good for us, and even though we don't understand why, right now, good. But that doesn't mean we're here. Our identity is being challenged. On the other hand, if we just say if that's leads us to have to conclude no. But if we conclude no, then we've done something foolish. We rejected something that obviously is good for us, and we've also challenged the authority of God. That was Klal Yisrael's dilemma. That really was Klal Yisrael's dilemma. This has to be contractual. We have to do it b'chachma. We have to do it from ourselves. And on the other hand, obviously it's going to be good for us because God's telling us to do it. And obviously, to have any questions about it, it's going to have to be a question of authority. And that's the secret of Nasa v'Nishma. Nasa v'Nishma was the answer that solved all these problems.
What was the problem?
The problem is they had to do it because they understood it. They had to understand it. They understand why it was smart to listen to God. Why they would want to do what God would want them to do. At the same point in time, in other words, at this point in time, now what you're arguing is that the reason I'm bringing up this issue in terms of Yumas Ha'olam is you're saying, well, they wanted to do it anyways. It was their natural tendency to do it anyway. So it was like, I'm trying to say that all it does is separate them from the Yumas Ha'olam by just being different. What I'm trying to say is there's something else that's different here. That the Yumas Ha'olam, the mistake the Yumas Ha'olam didn't make is by definition what God's going to tell them to do is going to be good for them. That's by definition. Kodesh Baruch Hu is a Tov V'Meitiv. Whatever God would tell human beings to do is by definition good for them. So therefore, them analyzing and saying, hey, our whole being is not to do this, right? Okay, that analysis itself, so what? If God's telling you to do it, then obviously it is what's good for your being. If you're saying, we're essentially murderers, how can we do this? Well, if God's telling you to do it, then by definition it must be good for you even though you think you're murderers. I.e., you for sure have a way of channeling that drive correctly through Torah that you can satisfy that drive as well. That's really what's being said here, is we have a way of satisfying the drive as well. There must have been, but they couldn't see that. But by definition, it's clear they should have seen it. In other words, in the end, what's being pushed out over here is that the Umas Ha'olam were just foolish, not because they didn't know it wasn't good for them. By definition, it had to be good for them because God was offering it to them.
So we still have the question of why Nas definition was such a big deal.
Right. Okay, I'll have to do that next week.